Do you feel like anxiety is controlling you, paralyzing you, and robbing you of your peace? Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live without the constant pressure of worries and fears that arise at every moment? The truth is, we've all faced anxiety in some form, and if you're here, you're likely searching for a way to deal with it. What if I told you that the key to transforming anxiety isn't in avoiding it, but in using it as a driving force for growth? Stoic philosophy, with over 2,000 years of wisdom, may hold the answer to this transformation. In this video, we'll dive into the practices of Stoic philosophers and learn how to turn anxiety into a powerful tool for self-mastery, emotional control, and inner peace. Don't miss it, because change begins with choosing to see anxiety through new eyes. Are you ready to turn the tables? Comment. How do you handle anxiety in your daily life? Share your experience in the comments. 1. Understanding anxiety. What it really means for you. Anxiety often presents itself as a dense fog, shrouded in uncertainties, that obscures the view of what is clear and obvious. It can arise suddenly, without warning, or build up gradually, creating a sense of discomfort that seems never to fully dissipate. For many, anxiety manifests as a whirlwind of racing thoughts, a constant feeling of being overwhelmed, lost in worries and fears that seem to come out of nowhere. However, it's important to understand that anxiety is not an enemy, but a reflection of our mind in imbalance. It feeds on our lack of control, our inability to manage internal chaos, and it's at this point that transformation begins, in the realization that anxiety, at its core, is an opportunity to learn more about yourself. Stoic philosophy teaches us that, like any emotion, anxiety is natural and part of the human experience. However, the way we respond to it is what truly determines whether it will dominate us or whether we can use it as fuel for growth. Seneca, in his letters, reminds us that it's not what happens, but how we react to what happens, that shapes us. Anxiety is a reaction, a reflex of the mind trying to process what is beyond its control. And here lies the secret. Instead of fighting against it, we can learn to observe it with emotional distance, without letting it dictate our actions. The first step, then, is to realize that anxiety is not something to be feared, but something to be understood, accepted, and ultimately transformed. Within the context of personal transformation, anxiety can be an opportunity for self-awareness. When we feel anxious, we are, in some way, confronting our deepest beliefs, fears, and insecurities. Like a current that sweeps everything in its path, anxiety can force us to look at aspects of our lives we would normally avoid. And it's in this courageous gaze, this deep dive into the unconscious, that we find the tools for true transformation. By understanding what truly lies behind anxiety, whether it's external pressures, the relentless pursuit of control, or a lack of self-mastery, we can begin to reorganize our mind, clear the confusion, and bring the clarity we so desperately seek. The journey of transformation begins when we decide to face anxiety head-on, without fear, and use it as a springboard to build a stronger, calmer, and more focused mind. The Stoic path. Facing anxiety with wisdom. The Stoic path to confronting anxiety is not about rejecting emotions or trying to suppress what we feel, but about learning to act with wisdom in their presence. Stoic philosophy invites us to see anxiety not as a burden, but as a lesson in disguise. It teaches us that what we truly need to control is not the external world, but our internal reactions. Anxiety often stems from a sense of powerlessness over what we cannot control, the future, circumstances, or the behavior of others. But as the Stoics always remind us, it's not what happens to us, but what we do with what happens to us, that defines our inner peace. Therefore, the first step to facing anxiety with wisdom is to take the reins of our reactions, cultivating the ability to observe thoughts and emotions without identifying with them. The Stoic mind, with its clarity and self-control, offers a unique perspective on anxiety. Instead of letting ourselves be swept away by it, like a boat adrift in a stormy sea, the Stoics teach us to remain steadfast, like an unshakable rock in the ocean of life. Epictetus, with his practical insight, reminds us that anxiety is often a reaction to our own expectations of what should be. Anxiety arises from our resistance to reality, from our attempt to control the uncontrollable. By practicing radical acceptance, as suggested by the Stoics, we can loosen the grip of anxiety, allowing it to flow without deeply affecting us. True Stoic strength lies not in avoiding anxiety, but in consciously choosing how to respond to it, with serenity, emotional distance, and the awareness that life, in its essence, is unpredictable and often beyond our control. Adopting the Stoic path does not mean ignoring suffering or difficulties, but facing them with a transformative perspective. When anxiety knocks at your door, you can choose not to react with fear or panic, but with reflection and the understanding that it is an opportunity to test your self-mastery. Like an athlete who trains their body to resist fatigue, you can train your mind to resist anxiety, strengthening your ability to maintain focus and inner peace, even when the world around you seems to be crumbling. Stoic wisdom does not demand that you eliminate anxiety, but that you observe it with clarity, understand its origin, and then choose a response that aligns with your deepest values. And so, instead of being a destructive force, anxiety becomes an invitation to cultivate a strong and resilient mind. The practice of acceptance. Freeing yourself from anxiety. Through radical acceptance. Radical acceptance, one of the pillars of Stoic philosophy, is a practice that may seem challenging at first glance, especially when faced with anxiety and emotional discomfort. However, it is precisely this unconditional acceptance that frees us from the weight of anxiety. It teaches us that by fully accepting what we cannot control, the uncertainties of life, intense emotions, unpredictable challenges, we find freedom. Anxiety is often a reflection of our resistance to reality, our need to control everything and avoid discomfort. Radical acceptance invites us to let go of this resistance, allowing us to live in the present moment with all its ups and downs, without judgment or attachment. When the Stoics speak of acceptance, they are not suggesting passive surrender or apathy toward problems. On the contrary, radical acceptance is an active practice of observing reality as it is, without embellishments or distortions, and accepting what life offers us. Seneca, in his letters, says, "Happiness is freedom from fear and anxiety, and this freedom is only possible when we accept, in its entirety, what is beyond our control." When we practice acceptance, we are not just allowing anxiety to exist, we are also making a conscious choice not to identify with it. By not fighting against anxiety, it loses its power over us, and, over time, transforms from a feared enemy into an energy we can observe without being consumed by it. Radical acceptance as a tool for mental transformation also teaches us the importance of self-compassion. In moments of anxiety, we can be quick to judge ourselves, criticizing ourselves for being weak or unable to cope. However, the Stoics remind us that self-compassion is an essential virtue for personal growth. By accepting anxiety as part of the human experience and treating ourselves with kindness and understanding, we begin to cultivate emotional resilience. And this acceptance is not passive, but active. A commitment to the freedom of reacting thoughtfully and consciously, rather than succumbing to the automatic reactions that anxiety tries to impose on us. Thus, instead of being victims of our own minds, we become masters of them, capable of transforming anxiety into a force for self-awareness and inner strength. Focus on control, the power of controlling the uncontrollable. When anxiety arises, it often comes with a sense of powerlessness. We think we are at the mercy of everything that affects us, others' expectations, external circumstances, and unpredictable events. However, this is where Stoic wisdom comes into play. Stoic philosophy teaches that true freedom does not lie in controlling what happens around us, but in mastering how we react to those events. The power of control lies in our ability to focus exclusively on what is within our command, our thoughts, our attitudes, our emotional responses. By concentrating our energy on what is controllable, we can alleviate the anxiety that arises when we try to control the uncontrollable. Anxiety often stems from fear of the future, a future that is beyond our control. When we cling to the need to predict and control every detail, the mind becomes agitated, overwhelmed, and panics. Stoic philosophers like Epictetus remind us that we must focus on the present, on what we can actually do in the current moment. Do not worry about things that do not depend on you, he said. This maxim reflects one of the central principles of Stoicism, the clear distinction between what we can control and what we cannot. When we cling to what is beyond our reach, anxiety grows. But when we free ourselves from those concerns and focus on our own reactions, we gain power over our emotions and actions. By focusing on what we can control, our choices, thoughts, and attitudes, we begin to create a stronger and more resilient mind. This does not mean ignoring reality or pretending challenges don't exist, but simply recognizing that by choosing our responses, we can transform the impact those challenges have on us. Every time we focus on the present, we free ourselves from worries about the future or regrets about the past, and we find peace amidst the chaos. The daily practice of bringing the mind back to what is controllable, of practicing self-control and self-mastery, becomes a constant path of growth. Anxiety loses its strength when we understand that ultimately we are the rulers of our own minds. The Stoic mind. Developing self-mastery in the face of anxiety. The Stoic mind is the key to transforming any emotion, including anxiety, into a tool for growth. Instead of being dominated by it, the Stoic observes anxiety, understands its origin, and chooses how to respond. The practice of self-mastery does not mean suppressing or ignoring feelings. It means recognizing them, understanding them, and acting consciously. It is an empowering process. When anxiety appears, the Stoic does not shy away from it or try to escape the discomfort. On the contrary, they face this emotion head-on, with serenity, and realize that, at its core, it is not anxiety itself that harms us, but the way we react to it. Seneca, in his letters, speaks of the importance of mastering one's own mind, so that it does not master us. The disciplined Stoic mind becomes capable of handling any adversity, including anxiety, with clarity and rationality. By cultivating self-mastery, anxiety loses its power to control us. It becomes merely a transient emotion, coming and going without leaving deep marks. The Stoic practices daily reflection, which is an essential pillar of self-mastery. They observe their reactions and, upon identifying patterns of anxious thinking, consciously choose to modify them, transforming them into balanced, rationally controlled responses. Moreover, the practice of inner silence, a fundamental component of the Stoic mind, is a powerful tool for self-mastery. By creating spaces for introspection and meditation, Stoics can distance themselves from mental turmoil and reconnect with serenity. This silence is not an emptiness, but a space where emotions can be observed without the urgency to react. Like a calm river flowing without haste, the Stoic's mind finds its balance amidst chaos. And so, anxiety, which initially seems like a destructive force, becomes an opportunity to deepen self-awareness, develop greater mental resilience, and achieve the profound self-control that allows us to live with more clarity and purpose. Transforming emotions. How to use anxiety as fuel for personal growth. Anxiety, as uncomfortable as it may be, is an emotion with transformative power when understood and channeled properly. Instead of seeing anxiety as an obstacle, we can view it as raw energy, ready to be used to our advantage. Stoicism teaches us not to fight our emotions, but to direct them consciously, using them as fuel for our evolution. Anxiety, when accepted without resistance, can become a force of movement, an impulse that propels us toward action. Instead of being consumed by it, we can choose to use it to drive us toward personal growth and success. When we feel anxiety, the first step is to observe what it is trying to communicate to us. What lies behind this discomfort? Often, anxiety arises when we are about to take an important step, when we are facing a significant challenge or opportunity. Instead of fearing it, we can use this feeling as a sign that we are stepping out of our comfort zone, that we are at a crucial point in our journey. As Stoic philosophers suggest, we can reframe anxiety, understanding it not as an enemy, but as an ally that alerts us to opportunities for growth. The key is to channel this energy into something positive, something that helps us move forward with more courage and focus. By using anxiety as fuel, we develop a growth mindset, where every difficulty becomes an opportunity to learn and evolve. The practice of mental reprogramming, one of the foundations of Stoicism, allows us to alter our perception of emotions. When we feel anxious, we can pause and reflect on what this emotion is telling us. By focusing on our response, rather than simply reacting, we take the first step toward transforming anxiety into strength. Every small progress in this process strengthens our mental resilience and our ability to turn any obstacle into an opportunity for personal improvement. And so, anxiety, which could be a blockage, becomes the fuel that powers our path to true emotional freedom and self-mastery. Daily reflection. The Stoic practice for understanding and overcoming anxiety. Daily reflection, an essential Stoic practice, is one of the most powerful tools for understanding and dealing with anxiety. Stoic philosophers dedicated specific moments of the day to reflect on their actions, emotions, and reactions as a way to understand themselves and align with what truly matters. This practice teaches us to slow down and observe the day's events from a new perspective, distancing ourselves from the automatic reactions that typically dominate us. Daily reflection on anxiety allows us to discern what lies behind this emotion, what fuels fear and worry, and thus, we can begin to work with these emotions rather than being controlled by them. When we practice daily reflection, we become more aware of our emotional reactions. At the end of each day, we can ask ourselves, what caused my anxiety today? And in doing so, we begin to unravel the patterns that lead us to feel out of control. Stoicism teaches that our inner peace depends on our ability to observe our emotions objectively and without judgment. By reflecting on our fears and worries, we can start to understand that many of them are based on assumptions or external expectations we cannot control. By becoming aware of this, we begin to free our minds from the prison of fear and anxiety, creating space for a clearer and more balanced mindset. Furthermore, the practice of daily reflection strengthens our ability to make decisions with greater discernment. Instead of acting impulsively, driven by anxiety, we can use this time to ask ourselves, what can I really control here? This helps us find more effective solutions and make decisions with a calmer and more focused mind. As Stoic philosophers teach us, the key to overcoming anxiety is not in trying to eradicate it, but in developing the ability to respond to it in a balanced way, with rationality and self-control. Daily reflection thus allows us to transform anxiety from an obstacle into a moment of learning, where the mind is strengthened and inner peace is restored. Inner silence, how to find inner peace. Even in moments of anxiety, inner silence is one of the most profound and transformative practices we can cultivate in our lives. When anxiety invades our mind, the internal noise becomes unbearable. Racing thoughts, fears, and worries intertwine, creating a mental chaos that seems never-ending. However, it is precisely at this moment that inner silence becomes a refuge of peace. By learning to quiet the mind, we can find a space of tranquility where anxiety loses its strength. Stoic philosophers like Seneca taught us that true peace does not come from the absence of problems, but from our ability to remain calm amidst chaos. Inner silence allows us to connect with our essence, with the inner strength that guides us, regardless of external storms. The practice of inner silence is not about ignoring or suppressing emotions, but about observing them without getting lost in them. When we are silent, we are not fleeing from anxiety, but creating a space between thought and reaction. This space is where emotional control begins, by simply allowing anxiety to be present without judgment, without trying to change or avoid it. We begin to realize that it is not permanent. It comes, disturbs us for a while, and then passes. By practicing inner silence, anxiety loses its power to dominate us as we become calm observers of our own minds. The Stoic mind, cultivated with discipline and reflection, teaches us that in silence, we find true emotional freedom. Finding inner silence also means cultivating daily moments of introspection, where we pause to breathe, reflect, and be at peace with who we are. Meditation, deep breathing, silent contemplation, these practices help us slow down the mind and restore balance. As the Stoics suggest, it is in moments of tranquility that we can analyze emotions with clarity and make more rational decisions. Anxiety, in this context, transforms from a frightening enemy into an ally that teaches us about our fears and insecurities. allowing us to face them with courage and wisdom. When we find peace within ourselves, anxiety loses its ability to disturb us, and we finally find true serenity. Detachment. How to free yourself from worries and anxieties about the future. The future, with all its uncertainties, is one of the most common sources of anxiety. What awaits us? What will our lives be like in a month, a year, a decade? These thoughts often turn into constant worry, trapping the mind in a cycle of speculation and fear. However, detachment, a fundamental Stoic principle, offers the key to freedom. Detaching from the need to control the future does not mean giving up on our goals, but accepting that what is to come is beyond our control. By practicing detachment, we free our minds from the chains of worry, allowing us to live fully in the present moment, with clarity and confidence. Detachment is the art of accepting what we cannot predict or control, knowing that the future will unfold as best it can, regardless of our anxieties. Anxiety about the future is often fueled by expectations and fears that in most cases never materialize. The Stoics teach us that living in the present is the only path to true peace. What depends on us is what we do now, says Epictetus. When we practice detachment, we begin to realize that the future, as important as it may be, does not need to be a constant source of anxiety. What truly matters is what we are doing now, the choices we make today. Instead of worrying about what may or may not happen, we can focus our energy on what is within our reach, our actions, thoughts, and attitudes. Detaching from the future is not resignation, but a way to restore mental and emotional balance, creating space for the serenity that comes from acceptance. This detachment, however, is not an act of passivity, but an active decision to focus on the present. Detachment from outcomes allows us to act with more courage and clarity, without the burden of constant worry. By understanding that the future is uncertain, but our ability to act in the present is unassailable, we begin to build a mindset of growth and resilience. Anxiety about the future loses its power when we dedicate ourselves to what we can control now. In this way, detachment teaches us to live with more freedom and less fear, transforming anxiety into a motivating force to act in the present moment with confidence and purpose. Stoic visualization. Anticipating anxiety with serenity and control. Visualization is a powerful tool used by athletes, leaders, and thinkers in various fields. In Stoicism, visualization is not just a mental preparation technique, but a practice for facing difficulties with serenity. For the Stoic, life is full of uncertainties, and it is in mental preparation for these challenges that we find true peace. By visualizing the future with anticipation, we can imagine not only what we desire, but also what might happen, including obstacles and adversities. In doing so, the Stoic prepares their mind to handle any eventuality with calm, distance, and rationality. Anxiety often arises from fear of the unknown, but by anticipating situations with clarity, we can face them with the confidence that we control our reactions. When we practice Stoic visualization, we don't limit ourselves to imagining what is positive, but also mentally prepare for setbacks. The technique is simple, yet profound. Imagine the situation that causes anxiety. Visualize the difficulties and challenges that may arise, but also visualize your reaction, calm, controlled, and wise. Through this practice, anxiety begins to lose its strength, because the mind has already been trained to deal with it before it happens. Stoic philosophers, like Marcus Aurelius, taught us that we should not fear challenges, but prepare for them. When we do this, anxiety dissipates, replaced by a sense of preparation and self-control. It's as if we become architects of our own minds, designing our emotional response to what awaits us. Visualizing challenges with serenity also teaches us to adapt our mindset to what is inevitable. What happens ultimately is not within our control, but our reaction is our choice. Stoic visualization is not about changing the future, but about changing our attitude toward it. By practicing this technique regularly, anxiety transforms from a paralyzing fear into energy channeled toward focused and balanced action. We become stronger in the face of difficulties, not because we avoid them, but because we are mentally prepared to face them with courage and self-control. Mental resilience. How Stoic philosophy teaches us to overcome Adversities with strength. True mental strength is not measured by the absence of challenges, but by our ability to face them with courage and resilience. Stoic philosophy offers a practical approach to cultivating this resilience, teaching us that adversity is inevitable, but how we respond to it is always within our reach. For the Stoics, difficulties are not obstacles, but opportunities for growth. True mental resilience comes from accepting that we cannot control external circumstances, but we can always control how we choose to respond to them. When we practice radical acceptance, one of the Stoic pillars, we begin to understand that adversities are part of life, and it is our attitude toward them that defines our true strength. Stoic philosophers remind us that in life, it is not what happens to us that defines us, but what we do with what happens. Every adversity, no matter how difficult, is a chance to prove our inner strength and apply the Stoic teachings of self-control and mental discipline. Mental resilience is not something we are born with, but something cultivated through constant practice. Like a muscle, it strengthens as we exercise it. When anxiety, fear, or discomfort arises, we can choose to respond with serenity and rationality, as Epictetus teaches us. It is not events that afflict us, but our opinions about them. The practice of daily reflection and constructive self-criticism helps transform these adversities into levers for our personal development. This resilience does not mean ignoring suffering, but learning to navigate it with dignity and focus. Mental resilience is the ability to maintain calm and clarity even when immersed in challenging situations. By cultivating a growth mindset, where we see every obstacle as an opportunity to learn, anxiety becomes a propelling force. We are not victims of our circumstances, but masters of our own minds. And as we apply Stoic principles in our lives, emotional control, introspection, detachment, our mental strength grows, making us increasingly prepared to face life's challenges with an unshakable spirit and a serene heart. Stoic inner peace, transforming anxiety into lasting strength for self-mastery. Inner peace is not something we find outside ourselves, but something we cultivate within through the constant practice of self-mastery. For Stoic philosophers, true peace comes from controlling the mind, from the ability to master our reactions and find balance, even amidst the storm. Anxiety, at its core, is an emotional response to what we cannot control, an internal struggle against reality. However, Stoic inner peace teaches us that by accepting what we cannot change and focusing on what is within our reach, we find a safe haven. Anxiety dissolves when we choose to react with clarity and composure, without getting lost in fears and worries that often do not materialize. The practice of self-mastery, one of the fundamental pillars of Stoicism, allows us to transform anxiety from a destructive force into a propelling energy. The secret lies in understanding that anxiety is not an enemy to be fought, but an emotion to be observed and managed with wisdom. When anxiety arises, instead of resisting it or trying to escape, the Stoic accepts it as part of the human process, and, in doing so, gains the power to change their relationship with it. Instead of being consumed by anxiety, the Stoic uses it as an opportunity to practice self-mastery and self-control. True inner peace does not come from the absence of adversities, but from our ability to remain serene and balanced, even in the face of turbulence. The transformation of anxiety into lasting strength occurs through mental reprogramming. By applying Stoic teachings of detachment, radical acceptance, and daily reflection, we create a strong and resilient mindset, capable of facing any challenge without losing focus. Every moment of anxiety, when approached with self-mastery, becomes an opportunity to strengthen our inner peace and reinforce our emotional control. Anxiety, which once seemed an obstacle, transforms into a source of strength and wisdom. By cultivating the Stoic mind, we develop the ability not only to endure adversities, but to use them to grow and evolve. And so we find, at last, true freedom. A lasting inner peace that allows us to navigate life with serenity and self-mastery, regardless of what happens around us. Now that you've learned the Stoic principles for transforming anxiety into a lasting force of self-mastery, it's time to put this knowledge into practice. Remember, true change doesn't happen just by watching a video, but by applying each teaching in your daily life. Ask yourself, what can you start doing today to transform anxiety into your ally instead of your enemy? What small steps can you take to live with more serenity and less fear of the future? I invite you to start now. Comment below about what you learned most from this video and how you plan to apply these teachings in your life. If you want to continue this journey of self-awareness and transformation, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell to receive alerts, and don't miss the upcoming videos. Also, click the link in the pinned comment. There, you'll find an ebook that will help you reprogram your mind and continue on the path to emotional freedom. The change starts with you now.